Bentornati! Welcome back to Felinésse. I'm your host, Melissa Mezzalira, and today I am joined by Dr. Odette Suter. Dr. Suter, also affectionately known as the Dr. Poop Lady, has been a veterinarian for over 30 years, and she is known for her truly holistic whole pet approach. She's a respected holistic veterinarian. She's a best-selling author and educator who helps overwhelmed pet parents finally get answers when their pets struggle with gut issues, allergies, and chronic disease. What I love is how she helps pet parents understand the root causes behind their pets' health issues and empowers all of us to maximize our pets' health through proactive care. I am so happy to have her here with us today. Welcome, Dr. Suter.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I love speaking to people and pet parents and helping them because I think there's plenty of suffering on this planet and we all need the help that we can get to get our animals to feel better and grow ourselves in the process as well.
Yes, that's true. I agree with that. And thank you so much for being here to share your wisdom with us today. I have to say, what I love is that you use the term maximizing our pet's health, which is extremely important, and also proactive wellness. I really believe that this should be embraced by far more veterinarians. So instead of treating a disease, we should be focusing on trying to prevent it before it even manifests. And so I am glad you're here because I really think that more and more cat parents want to understand what's going on with their pet's health, and they want to be proactive and support their long-term health. So who better than you to share your knowledge with us today? Yeah. So to start, I would like to ask, how does your own approach differ from conventional veterinary medicine? And also, what makes it unique compared to other holistic or integrative styles that people might be familiar with?
Good question. So I always compare holistic medicine and conventional medicine as one being the firefighters and the other ones being the ones that come and repair the house afterwards. So conventional medicine is really, really good for emergency situations. You know, if there's a trauma going on, your dog or well, we're talking about cats here. Your cat needs surgery or needs some intervention to stay alive, then that's what they're really good for. Conventional medicine is also excellent for diagnostics. They can do all kinds of testing to really figure out what is going on. So that is what conventional medicine is really, really good for. And then once the firemen have been here and have extinguished the fire, basically, the emergency situation, the more acute thing that needs some help right away, then we can move on to repairing the house, basically. So we bring in the carpenters, the plumbers, the mold remediators, because all the water creates damage too. So then we come in, from a holistic perspective, and we bring in things that help to rebuild the foundation of health, rebuild the body, repair the damage that happened through the acute whatever issue that was going on. And then also, what can happen from, the drugs, because drugs are also potentially causing some side effects. And so we're basically kind of repairing. So that's the difference. And I just want to say real quick, because pet parents and cat parents as well, they sometimes get a little bit frustrated because they are basically expecting their conventional vet to do what the holistic vet does. And so they're like, yeah, but why didn't they tell me about diet? Why didn't they tell me about this? Why aren't they doing that? So it's a little bit like, the conventional vet is like the plumber and the holistic vet is the electrician. So if you have a plumbing issue, you get the plumber. If you have an electrical issue, you get the electrician. So you have to kind of know who is good for what can they do for your cat, basically. And then don't get upset if they can't do for your cat what you're wanting, because you picked the wrong one.
I think is such a great analogy there. I agree. And I think I am a little bit guilty of that, because when I go to the conventional veterinary, I'm expected to hear some answers that perhaps they don't have. So I think it's important that you made that distinction so that we know.
Yeah. I mean, and that doesn't mean that you can't, educate your plumber to do what the electrician also does, or kind of steer them in the direction of maybe learning a little bit of electrical. stuff as well, and vice versa. I mean, all veterinarians go through conventional training originally, and then holistic vets tend to branch out into some other things like acupuncture, chiropractic work, or herbs, other types of things, and then also shift a little bit in the philosophy of healing, although that can be a little bit of a challenge too, because what I also hear a lot from pet parents is that they went to a holistic vet and the holistic vet was not all that holistic after all. So they were prescribed a lot of, more conventional Western sort of things. And also the approach itself was a little bit more Western than they hoped for. And obviously, even as a holistic vet, if I see an animal that is in pain, I will provide them something to help, decrease the pain, but then I will work on fixing what the underlying, issue is. But I do find that oftentimes, holistic, it used to be that we would use a pill for every ill, right? So you have a headache, you get a pain medic, like Tylenol or something like that, and your headache goes away, right? And then it comes back. So that's kind of the conventional model. But there's also a what I call holistic, as in faux fur, full false holistic approach, that masquerades as holistic, but isn't really, where basically we have a symptom and then we take an herb or a supplement to basically use like a band-aid on that symptom instead of figuring out what's going on underneath. So that's a little bit, what the second part of the question that you asked, what's the difference between holistic vets? I think there are some that are probably a little bit more on the conventional side still, but they're dabbling in the more natural approaches and trying to add it, but they haven't quite made the shift in thinking of really looking at why is something happening and how can we really restore the whole and not just use natural things to treat the symptoms. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does.
So that's a little bit of the distinction.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that the first question I want to ask you is if you could please repeat something that I've learned in one of your amazing webinars, because one thing that really struck me was, so you were explaining leaky gut. And that was the first time that I actually understood it, because you made it so simple. And I think that a lot of mother cat parents, I've heard of that term, but they probably quite not understand really what it is and why it's so important. So if you could please re-explain that in a very simple way, like you did.
Yeah, sure. Would you like me to share a slide of it? Because picture is worth a 1,000 words, right?
If you have it, sure.
All right, so leaky gut is what we're talking about here. So leaky gut is basically just what it sounds like. It's the gut that's leaking. So it's leaking into the system. And you can see here on the left side, these are cells that are really close together. And that's how it should be, because there's a layer inside the gut that's just one layer of cells. And that basically separates whatever is being eaten and digested from the other side, where the blood supply and the lymph system, etc., is. So on this side would be food, and then on the other side we would have blood vessels and lymph vessels and nerves, etc. So there's only just one layer that separates these two compartments. And so these cells have to be really close together so that things can't just pour through undigested, because this is what's happening here. We have cells that are broken apart, they're being separated to the point where there's just like free flow from one side to another, which is not ideal. And that's what we call leaky gut. So we basically have holes in the gut lining where things go through, because in normal digestion, food would be processed and digested with all the digestive enzymes that are floating around that are being released by the pancreas and also by the cells themselves. And then these particles, these food particles, are broken down so much that they can then be absorbed through the cell and then go to the other side and are taken up into the bloodstream. So that's how it should ideally happen. But when we have big holes like that, we can have undigested food particles that just go right through and to the other side. And that obviously is an issue. And so you might ask, what is actually causing this leakage or this separation of the cell lining? And we have stress that can cause that, toxins, food particles, drugs, like antibiotics, for example, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Fluoxetine is another one that can also cause some issues. And then pathogens like parasites, giardia, etc., and then organ malfunction as well. And obviously in the toxin group, a big one is glyphosate, which is basically what's in Roundup, which is basically everywhere in this world now because it's been sprayed everywhere. So all of these things, they can contribute to this leaky gut situation right here. And so as I mentioned before, what happens is we have nutrient malabsorption when that's happening because we have these big particles that go through, they're not digested, and the body does not know what to do with that on the other side. So even though it is food, it's not, the body can't use it. And so as a result, then the body becomes deficient in certain nutrients. And then because we have these particles on the other side here of the gut lining, and microbes can go through as well, and toxins can go through. And so as a result, somebody's got to clean this up because this is a mess, right? So the immune system comes running and comes and cleans this up. And so what happens when the immune system is present, when it's active? I mean, we all know that, right? You have a head cold, what's happening? There's like snot pouring out, it's red, you're coughing, it's basically inflammation, right? And so when we have this inflammation happening on this side of the gut lining here, then this inflammation doesn't just stay there. This inflammation goes all over the body because it's also happening in the blood vessels. And so it's being distributed everywhere because what the immune cells do, they make inflammatory chemicals. And these inflammatory chemicals, they're trying to clean things up and help, and they cause more activity in the system. And so when we have this systemic inflammation, that's inflammation that's going everywhere, we also have inflammation in the brain, the liver, the kidneys, the joints. I mean, you name it, it basically goes everywhere. And that's why leaky gut is so damaging to the system, because it causes inflammation body-wide. And if it keeps going on and on and on, we have this chronic inflammation that never ends. And that's a big deal for the body because it causes the body to break down when we have chronic inflammation, because inflammation is supposed to clean things up, heal things, and then it's supposed to stop. Just like when you cut yourself, right, you have a little bit of inflammation there, but once it's healed, it's done. So it takes a few days and then it's gone. But when we have this chronic inflammation in the gut and then in the rest of the system as a result as well, then the inflammation, the body never heals. I mean, it's never done. So it's constantly in like a bit of more of a destructive sort of mode, because that's what inflammation does, is it destroys things so that then healthy things can start to build. But if the inflammation never stopped, the healthy parts can never really come back.
Yeah, I think that's what was the other really important point that I really understood from that, is that how everything is connected. We might think that everything, like you might have a GI inflammation or something that is in your digestive tract, but I never really thought about that. Also symptoms that are not related with those parts of the body, like you mentioned, even allergies or arthritis, or I believe sometimes even behavioral changes can actually start with an imbalance in our gut, which is, really, amazing to think about how powerful gut healing is. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and just because you don't have actual GI symptoms, so just because you don't see diarrhea or vomiting or constipation, it doesn't mean that there's not an inflammation present in the gut, because I see it quite a bit in animals. They have, flare-ups of ear infections and no GI signs at all. And that's usually a food sensitivity. And the food sensitivity obviously happens in the gastrointestinal tract. And that's one of those things that can happen from this chronic inflammation, is that the body becomes intolerant to certain foods, because it starts to read foods as, oh, it's an allergen. It's like something that I have to fight, because when you have big holes like you see here in the middle, where, for example, a big chicken particle is going through, then the immune system is going to be on high alert, like, okay, watch out for chicken. And so then when it eats chicken, it's like going to create a flare, and so that doesn't not necessarily have to lead to diarrhea or vomiting. It can just be showing up somewhere else. It can show up on the skin as well. And for me, for example, I do have a little bit of intolerance to gluten. If I eat it a few days in a row, I start to feel dizzy.
Oh,
A little
wow.
dizzy spell, and no change in my gut, and certainly no change in my desire to eat it, but but anyways, so it can manifest in different ways for sure.
Would it be fair to say that if we're looking to, let's say, rebalancing our gut or repairing our gut, then we are rebalancing the entire body?
Yeah, because you're basically just cutting down on the fire that's going on. You're basically extinguishing that fire. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So based on your experience, when you do this kind of rebalancing of or like whole body healing, if we want to call it like that, so what type of changes can we see in our pets?
So when we look at healing the whole body, then we start to heal everything else, because when you decrease inflammation in the body, it decreases the inflammation at the cell level. And in humans, there are like 70 trillion cells or something like that. I don't know how many are in a cat, probably less because they're smaller. But every single cell, when there's inflammation in the gut, becomes affected by this inflammation. And so the cell membrane is basically where a lot of the inflammation will sit. And when the cell membrane is inflamed, then it can't really process things. So food cannot, or nutrients can't get into the cell very well because there's just inflammation there, and waste cannot get out of the cell. And so then you don't have enough food for the cell, and the waste is building up, which obviously is never a good thing, right? So you can see it's like a double whammy for the cell. So it loses its ability to function, it loses its energy level, and the less energy a cell has, the more likely it is to turn into a cancerous cell, because cancerous cells are very low energy cells, basically. I mean, they do a lot of damage, but they don't have the right kind of energy anymore. And so when we have inflammation, we have to heal every single cell in order for all of these cells to be able to function properly again. And so just by healing the gut, we already decrease the inflammation significantly, so that, for one, the nutrients that are being eaten by your cat are getting in, are digested properly, are getting into the system. And then from there, because the inflammation is lower, they can get into the cells better. And because that then upregulates the cell's function, the cell can then start to dump out the waste. Okay, because it was just too tired to let it go, basically. So it's like spring cleaning, basically.
Right. Well, like we said earlier, everything is connected. And of course, we all know that nutrition is incredibly important. I think most cat parents, pet parents know that, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Like you shared earlier, and what I even often talk about is the environment our cats live in. So like even their beddings, their cleaning products that we use in the house, the chemicals that we have in our homes, all of those things can influence their health, their gut, and their immune system. So why would you say, like you mentioned a few elements that can be the cause of leaky gut, how do you feel that environmental toxins and everyday exposures play into our pets' overall health?
Yeah, they definitely play a huge role. And especially nowadays, things have changed significantly, where we have a lot more toxin exposure on a daily basis for our animals. And especially with cats, especially when they live indoors, they also have a much higher exposure to toxicity, because there's the outgassing from the walls, from the paint, from the carpet, from your new couch, from your new computer, from whatever you're buying. It's outgassing chemicals. And cats are really good at laying on all these surfaces. And even if they don't lay on it, it will still, they're still exposed
Great.
because it's also floating around in the air, and then it gets on their coat, and then you know what they do, right? They're licking themselves constantly. And so a lot of these toxins then get into their system even more so than, for example, for a human or a dog, for example, because they don't well. But anyway, so cats are very much exposed to that. And they also have different metabolic pathways than us humans. So they will detox things differently a little bit than we humans do, or dogs as well, because cats are definitely not small dogs. So in any case, the environmental exposure is obviously huge. And then whatever we use as washing, dishwasher, other kind of chemicals that we use in and around the house, all of these things, they get exposed to basically. And then add insult to injury, you know, over the last 20 or so years, we've added, you know, Wi-Fi and other kinds of electromagnetic radiation to the mix. And that has obviously also impacted everyone, basically, even if one may not be sensitive to it. I mean, you know, consciously sensitive to it, it will still affect the cells, because cells, the microbes in the body that are helping, you know, the microbiome in the gut and the skin, etc., they all communicate via electromagnetic signals as well, and chemical signals, but also electromagnetic signals. And so when we have an electromagnetic signal that's coming from the outside, like from a cell phone or from your Wi-Fi router or from your smart meter or from some faulty electrical wiring in the house, etc., that will then also impact the cell's ability to communicate, because it's a bit like, you know, you're in a room or in a restaurant and it's really loud and you barely can hear anything because everybody is talking all at once and it's loud, and you're like, okay, I don't know. So if somebody were to scream fire, fire, you probably wouldn't hear it, right? So it's like the cells don't communicate with each other as well because there's too much noise going on. So we have to reduce the noise. So we have to reduce the noise from the toxins. We have to reduce the noise from electromagnetic radiation. We need to reduce the noise from stress, because all of these things that are affecting the body are basically like noise, and it builds up, you know, it's like a bucket, you know, they build up in the bucket, and eventually the bucket starts to overflow. And that's when we start to see major symptoms, and, you know, where we have a little bit more of a major crisis going on.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned also stress, because I think that another thing that I really appreciate about your approach is that it is not only looking at the physical side of it, but you also look at the emotional and the mental state of the pet. I think it's such an important piece, how you mentioned stress or emotional balance can actually affect also their physical health. So can you talk a little bit about that, how these emotional or mental stressors can influence their overall health?
Yeah, so stress tends to be more of a sympathetic nervous system activity. So we have an autonomic nervous system, which basically, just like it says, it's autonomic. It does its thing on its own. And it basically stimulates the internal organs and blood vessels, etc., to do what they need to do without us having to think about it. For example, we don't have to think about our heart beating, and your blood pressure is being regulated automatically as well. So the autonomic nervous system is basically automatically regulating the major systems in the body that, you know, help with survival, obviously, and function. And so when we have stress, let me go back. So we have two branches of that autonomic nervous system. And one is the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, run away, you know, freeze is another one as well, which I see quite frequently in cats. You know, if you go to the vet and they just kind of hunker down and they're like, I'm not moving, you know, maybe they'll go away. That's the freeze response, which is a sympathetic response. Oftentimes it's confused with, oh, my cat did really well at the vet. No, your cat was frozen in fear. That's what happened. And, or, you know, they get all fractious and they you know, go on full on attack. Or then the third option is they try to wiggle themselves out of whatever, you know, hold they have, trying to avoid. So that's the sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the part that is just the opposite of that. So it's all about relaxation, calm, peace, digesting, healing. That's basically the parasympathetic nervous system. And we obviously we need both, right? We need to be able to tie our shoes and leave if a lion shows up, but we also need to be able to digest and relax and kind of get out of that. And nowadays, what's happening for us humans particularly is we never get out of stress mode. We stay in that sympathetic stress mode, even though there's really no lion anywhere near me. I still have one that's sitting right here, you know, and saying, oh, you should do this, you should do that. If you don't, then this is going to happen, blah, 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 you know, and boss is pushing this way and that, you know, it's like we have all this going on in our lives. So that's kind of the part that's really detrimental to the body long term, not just for, you know, us humans, but obviously for our cats as well, because our animals, they pick up on how we feel. So if we come home from work and we're all stressed out, they're like, oh my God, what's going on with her? You know, and purr until your own, you know, nervous system kind of gets more aligned again, or they're going to go hide somewhere, or they're going to go show you how much stress you have by, oh, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to pee everywhere because I have an inflammation in my bladder from all the stress that's going on, or, you know, however they usually do it, but they always have a way of showing us what's not working. And they have a way of pushing all our buttons and, you know, being a mirror of what's going on. But basically stress is a huge deal.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you on how cats are so sensitive on and they pick up on our senses and everything that we are feeling, they're feeling. So we also have to be, it's actually great to have them as kind of our healers, because it's true, like when I hear my cats purring on my lap, I mean, it's like a very relaxing sensation, but at the same time we don't want to give them our stress because then they absorb it from us. So, you know, it's really important to also remember that. Or even to me, I'm also always paying attention on not having like loud noises in the house, or trying not to, you know, to do things that might scare them. Because sometimes it really, you know, it might be just a little thing that we don't pay attention, and then it has such a big effect on them. So, you know, every little thing we can do to keep them comfortable, you know, like quiet when they're sleeping. Yeah, that's important too. Yeah. I love how you have this whole comprehensive healing approach, you know, that covers kind of all of aspects of our pets' lives. So if we want to give the listener like a little takeaway, what would you say? What are a few simple steps that they can take today to start moving toward a more balanced health for their cats? Like what do they start? Is there something that maybe like certain tests that they can do, or they shifts things that they can do at their home? What would you recommend?
Obviously, it always depends a little bit on where you're at with your animals. For example, if a cat is eating only dry food and it's not the best quality to begin with, then starting to slowly move them from that into at least a wet food diet. That can take months, and you have to be really patient. So a quick thing that you can do is basically clean up the environment as much as is possible. So get rid of the plug-in lamps, the scented candles, the toxic, you know, cleaning products that you have. And a really good website to check that out is the environmentalworkinggroup.org. So EW.org. So you can basically take anything that you have, you can plug it in. They have like a database, and then it will tell you how toxic or what it can do to the body, so that you know what it is. And that will also include, you know, all the things that you're putting on yourself, because all of that gets on your cat as well. And women particularly, but men as well, they put up to close to 600 different chemicals, if I remember the number correctly, on their bodies every day. So get rid of some of that, go all natural. And then obviously provide them with filtered water and well-filtered water, not just like a carbon filter, because that's not enough to take out all these chemicals that are in the water nowadays. Even when you're on well water, you want to do that. If you can't put in a filter, like a reverse osmosis filter or something like that, then you can always just get water at the store. You know, they have these big jugs that you can fill up, right? So you bring your big jug, you get it filled up, because those are reverse osmosis water filters that they have in these big machines. And then you just bring it home and give that. Best is to also use more cotton or natural materials where they sleep, because that has better energy than all the synthetic things. You could put in an air purifier. That would be a good idea. Certainly air out the house on a regular basis to make sure that there's, you know, a little bit more oxygen, because indoor pollution is definitely a big deal. The second, oh yeah, turn off your Wi-Fi when you're not home. Don't leave your phone sitting right next to your cat when it's on. You know, put it on airplane mode or turn it off. You know, simple things like that.
Right. It's a lot of little things that I believe they make a big impact in their lives and in our lives too, because you know we live with them. So, and then as far as to check if there are some imbalances in their actual physical body, are there any tests or anything that you recommend?
Well, I'm a big fan of just doing regular testing, you know, every 6 months to a year, depending on how old a cat is, just to make sure that we can monitor things. Because as they get older, they can develop hyperthyroidism, for example. They can also develop blood pressure issues or kidney problems, liver problems, things like that. So if you can catch it early, then that obviously gives you you know, a leg up on how you then treat. Definitely. So as they age, you want to do it more frequently, and especially if there's an issue, obviously, that you see, you want to make sure that you have it checked out. I'm also a big fan of regular body work. So chiropractic work is one of my go-to things, but acupuncture can certainly help, a laser, massage, you know, whatever your cat will allow, because with cats, permission for what we think we should do. So, but that can make a big difference. For example, I had a cat who was coming for ozone therapy on a regular basis because she had some GI mass. And so we did some ozone therapy with her. And then we would also do some chiropractic work at the same time. And the owner became really good at noticing when her cat was having a hard time jumping up and down from things. So I would do a little chiropractic. She'd go home and she'd be fine for a few weeks. And then, you know, we'd have to repeat it a little bit. So chiropractic work, I find, is very helpful, because it helps to keep them mobile. Because a lot of cats, as they get older, they already have arthritis in maybe one or multiple joints. And so helping them stay more limber and more mobile starting early in life is always good, because then they have less issues down the road. And certainly also maybe watching some videos of what a cat, you know, what are signs that cats can be in pain, because they are good at hiding, but there are some that you can see, you know, if they don't jump up and down from things like they used to, if they hesitate going down the stairs or going up the stairs, if they have issues getting in or out of the cat litter box, you know, things like that, you want to watch out for, and then take action as needed.
Yeah, I think arthritis is actually one of the, unfortunately, very popular in, let's say, senior cats. So yeah, it's good to know how to read the signs, because, like you said, they're very good on hiding, and they will never tell us, "Hey, I have pain here." So yeah, so it's up to us to be good listeners. So, well, thank you for sharing all of that. And so, for anyone who wants to connect with you or learn more or access your resources, where they can find you, so they can easily reach you.
Yeah, so I have a website, and it's basically my first and last name, dvm.com. So Odette Suter, dvm.com is my website, and I have some blogs on that as well. And then I have a master class where I talk a bit more about what I just shared about leaky gut and how to fix that. And I also share about what it really takes to take a chronically sick animal and bring them into better health. So I'll show you the Carpenter's way of healing and rebuilding, because my goal is always to rebuild every single cell of the body, because when we do that, then all of the symptoms can kind of go away on their own. So we don't have to focus on individual symptoms. We can just focus on the whole thing and help to heal the whole thing and really maximize what's possible. Obviously, and by maximizing, what I mean by that is we go as far as the body can go, because obviously if you have a cat, there's only so far you can go with that, because you can't really give them their youth back in the same way as they used to have. But we want to maximize, so we want to get the body to the maximum health it can be, and that really starts by healing the gut, giving them good food, healing the gut, helping their body to detoxify all the toxins that accumulate, helping them to be mobile and have good exercise, because that's a huge part as well. That can cause a lot of stress for cats when they're not moving around enough, and that's a big issue with indoor cats. They don't move the same way as if they were outside, so we have to be more active that way with them. Anyway, so that's all the information that I kind of pack into that masterclass. And then for anyone who wants to then work with me because they have a cat who has chronic health issues, we can then get on a call so that I can assess what's going on, and then we can move on from there, see if I can help them and check it out. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today with us. I know that our listeners are going to take away a lot of inspiration from this conversation. To everyone tuning in, thank you for being here and for caring so deeply about your cat's health. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with another cat parent who could benefit from this. And I will see you in the next episode of Felinésse. Grazie mille, arrivederci, a presto.
Bye.
Bye.